Is anybody not ready? How about that? All right, hearing no voices. So my name is Mark Victor. I represent Dr. Steinmetz. Today what we're going to do is have a short statement that Dr. Steinmetz is going to deliver for the public. After that, I will be available to answer questions. Dr. Steinmetz will not answer any questions. And then after you guys are done with questions for me, Alan Corwin will have a chance to make an opportunity. He'll have an opportunity to make a statement if you guys want a statement from him. So, Dr. Steinmetz.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. I consider myself to be a freedom activist, a man of peace, and a responsible American citizen. I fully respect the rule of law, and I've complied with it my entire life. I'm also an educated and responsible gun owner who has earned the legal right to have a concealed weapons permit. I've received extensive training in the safe handling of firearms, as well as the substantial legal responsibilities that accompany firearm ownership. I enthusiastically support the rights of my fellow citizens to keep and bear arms, and to do so peaceably and responsibly. I also strongly oppose the irresponsible use of firearms by anyone. I take my constitutional rights, and actually those of all people, rather seriously, and I believe those rights need to be exercised and protected, or they will be lost. I am a peaceful political activist, and my purpose in walking around the airport with my AR-15 rifle was entirely political in nature. Put simply, I decided to make the point that a peaceful citizen can openly and responsibly carry a firearm, including an AR-15, for the protection of themselves and their community. I wanted to help educate the public and employees on the airport about this point by allowing them to see a peaceful person responsibly carrying an AR-15 while doing things that people normally do there, like waiting for someone, drinking a cup of coffee. I chose to make this lawful political demonstration at the airport because there are few places in our society where the contrast between our liberties and their erosion is so stark. On the one side of a line on the floor, we are relatively free. We can safely keep and bear arms. On the other side of that line, we have the TSA, a large federal bureaucracy which completely disarms people and subjects them to gross invasions of their privacy simply because those people want to travel somewhere. As I was making this political statement, I was careful not to disturb or endanger anyone. Indeed, I was never aware of any person being disturbed in any way. At all times, I was extremely careful to ensure my firearm was never pointed at anyone. In addition to carefully handling my firearm, the safety was engaged at all times. I have no plans to repeat this demonstration, as I believe I have now made the important point that the peaceful and responsible people can safely be trusted to handle firearms, even AR-15s and even at the airport. There's never anything to fear from peaceful, responsible gun owners. That's all I have to say. Mr. Victor will answer any questions.
Okay, I should have mentioned, I've got copies of that statement, so if you guys want to pass them around. Here, why don't you just take one and pass it along. And then if you guys have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them, but as I said, Dr. Steinmetz is not going to make any other statements at this time or any time in the future. Does anybody have any questions for me?
What do you know from the county attorney?
I did communicate with Bill Montgomery about this case just recently, and he's informed me that he turned it down for further investigation, which to me means very reasonably he's going to attempt to obtain all of the videos and look at those videos, and then he'll make a charging decision from there. No charging decision has ever been made on this case, and we welcome that. We think that's a good thing for the county attorney to do. I think that's the reasonable thing for him to do. It's a charge that allows a 7-year statute of limitation, so there's no reason to rush. Nobody in the community is in danger from Dr. Steinmetz, and so there's no crisis here. He doesn't have any priors, and so we expect that the county attorney will review those videos and determine that there has been no crime committed here. So we're not expecting additional charges.
What about the cost this has cost your client? He's now on administrative leave from his job. His reputation has been sullied. What about that to make a political point?
Well, I think the question about his reputation is it depends who you ask. I mean, there are people, I think, in the community, lots of them, I know because I've received, as his lawyer, many communications from many people who are championing what he's done. They're excited about a peaceful person with an AR-15 at the airport, and they're happy he made the political statement he did. There are other people I know who don't like that, and that's a decision that each person will have to struggle with on their own. In terms of his employment, that's between him and his employer.
Given the climate of what goes on in the world now, I mean, you know, there are horrible things going on at the hands of some crazy people. Where do you draw the line? What if there were 300 of Dr. Steinmetz's that day that walked into Sky Harbor with AR-15 or AR-40, whatever that he had?
Well, I'd expect if there were 300 of Dr. Steinmetz's at that airport that day, we could be pretty clear that there wouldn't have been any bad guys with guns. That would have been the worst possible place for them to take a firearm and start shooting people. So I think the point here is an important point. The issue isn't the gun. The issue is the nature of the person who's carrying the gun. And in this case, we had a firearm, which just happens to be the most popular firearm in America, that was being carried by somebody who was entirely peaceful. And as I've said on many occasions, nobody has anything to fear from a peaceful person, even with a firearm. Indeed, that is exactly what the founders of our nation thought when they drafted the Second Amendment, included in the Bill of Rights, and that's exactly what our Supreme Court said in the Heller case. It's an individual right to be exercised by American citizens peacefully. The airport is a place that he's lawfully allowed to exercise that right. That's where he exercised it. That's the reason I believe there aren't any charges right now. All right, let's start on this side.
I had a question over here as Donna was talking, so I'd just like to finish this
All right.
up, which is that the story about this being just a political event doesn't make complete sense. I mean, on one hand, he didn't say anything to the police when they arrested him. He didn't say this is political, or didn't say anything in terms of this being political. He didn't know the public would find out about it because, you know, until he was arrested for what he says, you know, is something he didn't do, which is, you know, intentionally pointed at anyone. He didn't know this was going to be on TV or even a public event. Also, he had one in the chamber. You know, what's the point of that, you know, for a political, peaceful purpose? It just doesn't all add up to a political event, and I wonder if you can elaborate on that.
Well, I mean, that you're certainly entitled to your opinion, but I think that in terms of what he was thinking at the time, I mean, I don't know that the thought process was for all of America to find out. I think the issue was for people at the airport who he would have liked to have seen a peaceful person, indeed sitting down, drinking a cup of coffee. In terms of the issue of him not saying anything to the police, I mean, fortunately, there are other constitutional rights that come into play. One of those is when you're being arrested, you have a right to remain silent, and that's the advice that would be given by any attorney to any person in that situation.
You know, he made a point to mention he had safety on. He had one in the chamber. He needed a safety on, didn't he?
Well,
so why put one in the chamber?
Well, certainly people carry with rounds in the chamber. That's how I carry on many occasions. That's why weapons have safeties on them. And this particular weapon had a safety. It was carried in a response. Well, let me answer your question.
Okay.
There was nothing about the weapon that was unsafe at the time. The safety was engaged. He carried the way the police carry. They carry with a round in the chamber, and we don't get horrible accidents as a result of that very often. We didn't get a horrible accident as a result of this, and so indeed, as it turned out, it was a safe way to carry, and it's a way millions of Americans carry.
Has Dr. Steinmetz had police training?
Well, he hasn't had police training, but fortunately, we've got lots of good training for civilians, and he did engage in that training. He's had lots of instruction. He's a CCW permit holder, and as you know, Arizona law requires hours of training, not just in handling the weapon, but also with the legal responsibilities that are involved for carrying a firearm, and he's completed all that, and so he's well qualified to carry this weapon. He did so in a safe manner, and that's the reason he's not in custody today. Let's get some on this side. Okay, over here.
Ricky, you have children, right?
I do.
So if you go to the airport and you saw a guy with your child right there, and maybe not even intentionally, that gets pointed at your child and your wife, that would make you feel a little bit uncomfortable?
Well, if somebody's pointing a weapon at another person, whether it was my child or any person, I would feel uncomfortable about it. But that's not what happened here. There's a big difference between what happened here and pointing a weapon at another person. And so if I saw somebody simply carrying a firearm, maybe even sitting down drinking a cup of coffee, the first thing I would try to assess as a responsible citizen is, who am I dealing with here? Is this a peaceful person? Is this somebody that has an intent that's a bad intent? I'd probably go up and talk to the person and say, hey, what are you doing? And if that person said to me, I'm just peacefully carrying a firearm, I would say, good for you, and I'd feel a lot safer, frankly. You know, citizens, responsible, peaceful citizens carrying firearms are things that make me and lots of other Americans feel safer. There could be people right now in this office carrying firearms, and I welcome responsible, peaceful people carrying firearms. Any questions going in this direction? No?
If you're gonna make a political statement, wouldn't you rather Bill Montgomery go ahead, put the charges on the table, get it into court so that you can start the process?
Well, you don't need to be charged with a crime to make a political statement. I think, especially wrongfully charged with a crime for a political statement, I think.
But the Supreme Court doesn't rule on people who just have press conferences.
Well, there are lots of ways to make political statements that have nothing to do with pending criminal charges. I think our country has a long history of people demonstrating peacefully for all kinds of different political causes. And, you know, the time to demonstrate maybe for firearms has come. We had civil rights demonstrations. It's a very hot issue in the United States. Arizona is a pro-gun state. We've had open carry in our state since we've had a state. That's exactly what happened here. And I think to the extent that this got any press in places like where I'm from in Massachusetts, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for people in other states that don't have such pro-gun policies in their states to see that a man with an AR-15 went to an airport and nothing happened except peace. And so I think that's a great political statement. People make political statements all the time without the government being involved. Indeed, I think that's the best way to make a political statement.
Deputy police have been out to your home, Dr. Steinmetz, 4 times this year so far for various disturbances. Can you talk about that? And are you having problems at home that may have led to you to make this decision?
And Dr. Steinmetz isn't going to answer any questions.
What do you know about them?
Well, I know that Dr. Steinmetz doesn't have any prior criminal convictions, and to my knowledge, no one has ever called the police on him.
Mark, these folks are asking about crime. This is about an exercise of rights. If you have rights and you can't exercise them, do you really have the rights? Isn't this about an exercise of civil rights? Why are they asking you about crime? There's no crime involved. This is about a basic exercise of fundamental civil rights.
There is an alleged crime, Alan.
I'm sorry?
There is an alleged crime, Alan.
But
So,
this is about
are there any
an
other
exercise of
questions
civil
for
rights.
me? Okay.
Your client says that this was a political demonstration, that he doesn't have any plans to do it again. Does that mean he feels as though his message has gotten across? You kind of touched on that a little bit.
He did. He made the statement that he feels like he's made his political point. He does not have any plans to repeat this kind of an incident, and I think the point is made. I think it was probably well made at this point, and I think there's a video that we've all seen many times of Dr. Steinmetz very peacefully sitting down at the airport drinking a cup of coffee, and that doesn't threaten anybody. And so everything I've ever seen on any of the videos has been entirely consistent with a peaceful man who happens to be carrying an AR-15 in a peaceful manner, and that's perfectly consistent with Arizona law, given the place it was carried.
Are all of the weapons that Dr. Steinmetz owned been confiscated by police?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Is he allowed to carry
He is allowed to carry. He doesn't have any.
right now?
He doesn't have any restrictions on him at all as a result of this incident at the moment.
And to be clear, was there actually a turn down for further by the county attorney?
My understanding, and I do not speak for the county attorney's office, but my understanding is that, and this is from communicating with Bill Montgomery, and he can clarify it if he thinks I got it wrong, but my understanding is that the county attorney chose not to file a complaint at the time one would have been required to be filed in order to proceed with the hearing, which was a status conference, and then days after that, the constitutionally required preliminary hearing. That wasn't filed because the county attorney did not have an opportunity to carefully review all the videos. I don't know if they even have all of the videos at this time. My understanding is they will get the videos, they will review the videos, and they will make a charging decision at that time.
Just to clarify, you said that he has, nothing has changed as far as his ability to carry weapons, but in the initial appearance, the judge did say as part of his bond agreement, he was not allowed to possess weapons. Has that changed, or is there a term difference here?
Well, we don't have an official term for that. We have jargon that we refer to as a scratch. So that case is no longer pending. There are no charges, at least not as of this moment that I'm aware of, in regards to this incident against my client. Question over here.
I just wanted a clarification to make sure that what the judge said at the initial appearance about the doctor not being able to have weapons, that's no longer in effect.
That's correct.
Thank you.
There's brought a lot of bad publicity to Barrow Neurological Institute. Did Dr. Steinmetz take that into account before he did the protest, and does he regret the fact that Barrow has had to sort of put up with this being linked to their name?
All I can say on that point is he's optimistic that his employer will see and realize that he didn't do anything wrong. He was simply, or illegal. He was simply exercising his political right to exercise on the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, and that they will eventually reinstate him without any issues at all. And that's the most I can say about that issue. Any other questions back here?
Going back to one of the things the police said right after this happened is that you know, Dr. Steinmetz said that he's an educated gun owner, and they said one thing that an educated person should realize is that this is something in the post 9/11 world that scares people. It makes them nervous. It is not good common sense. The police said that. Can you respond to that?
Well, I've been asked questions about whether it was wise in terms of whether other people would take action with firearms simply because another human being was carrying a gun. To me, that's very disturbing in America. You don't get to take action against another person because they're peacefully carrying a firearm. And so that's all that happened here. So I can't really go any further to answer your question. Unless you want to follow up with something else, I don't know. But
Is there a reason for that day, that particular day, as to why Mr. Steinmetz decided to do this?
no, not that I'm aware of. Any other questions? All right, given that, I'm going to